What is the process for transferring ownership or ending a cohabitation agreement, and what are the legal requirements involved?
The legal requirements are whatever you agree to. Once again, this is a private agreement between the two owners, but there are certain baselines that every owner, whether they're the in partner or the out partner, that they would want to look at. And what I mean by that is, uh, in the agreement, someone has to be the first one with the right to stay, which means that someone's the first one with the right to leave or the obligation to leave, depending on how you look at it. And so the things that are always important as far as cohabitation agreements is that making sure that you know what the ownership equity is. Yeah, if you don't have records from 7 years ago of what you put into the house for the percentages of the down payment, that's always a problem. But that snapshot's pretty easy. The second thing is going to be, well, let's get a clean break. The purpose of a cohabitation agreement is to give timelines, obligations, and deadlines for ending the relationship on the business side of it as opposed to the emotional side of it. And what that generally entails is I have a very formal notice of breakup, notice of cessation of cohabitation, where we get in an argument, and the next morning I write you an email that says, "Hey, just so you know, like we talked about, this is over, and here's my notice under the cohabitation agreement." And that starts a clock ticking. I have X number of days to move out from that date, and within X number of days I have to get out. And during that time, you have to choose if you want to stay or go. And if you don't want to stay, then I get to stay and you have to go. Obviously, I'm kind of throwing a lot at you on how all this works, but the most important thing is it gives a deadline for someone to get out, at which point the other person takes over the mortgage payments and has an obligation to either assume, refinance, or sell the property for the person who's leaving to get their equity out.
Okay.
The important thing that you can provide for in the cohabitation agreement is the obligation to do what's called an OWLT. An OWLT, it's important because it's Latin. OWELTY. It's generally used for divorces, but is applicable to anyone who jointly owns a property. And what it does, to kind of get on a deeper level dive, is that it gives someone an entire interest in the property in exchange for a promissory note and deed of trust, just like a bank does a promissory note and deed of trust for when you acquire a property, that allows for the person who leaves to get bought out by a refinance without having to do a cash out refinance. And why that's important, as any loan officer will tell you, is that a cash out refinance is generally going to be a half a point to a point higher on interest rates as opposed to just buying out an encumbrance on the property. It's a very legal mumbo jumbo type thing, but it can save a lot of money if both parties are agreeable and are knowing of what they're doing. But that OWLT is a way to solidify the ownership in one party's name and also give the party who leaves an enforcement mechanism, foreclosure if they need to have their equity returned to them and their ownership in the house protected against any failure to make a payment on that mortgage that they're a part of. And so that's the third party exit strategy. If you can do an assumption to get someone off the mortgage, if you can refinance to get their name off, if you can pay it off, if you can just write a check, because there are people that can do that, that's fine. But the things that have to be addressed are who stays, who goes, who gets their equity, how they get their equity, and most importantly, how do you get off of the mortgage? Because that's the most difficult tie to untie, because, as I said at the beginning, a bank doesn't care. The more people they can have responsible for their mortgage, the better.
You just gave me a new word to do more research and probably go down a rabbit hole. How's it pronounced?
OLT.
OLT. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
realize Texas might pronounce it different than it's supposed to be, but that's how I say it. So we'll stick with OLT.
And that's a Latin word, you said?
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm going to look real stupid.
Okay.